Welcome to the Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast. I am your host, Jason Walls from QA Cafe, and here with me is James Crenshaw, who's been working for OMDIA, but also all of the things associated with that very extensive company. He's written light reading articles in the past. He's done all kinds of stuff and is now sort of on a team that's helping telcos deploy the right kind of software for their large scale, OSS side operational things, which is something that we're definitely going to talk about because it's something. Even last week at the broadband forum, this all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's funny because I was like, are you tired of talking about AI? Because unfortunately,
Oh, you can never get tired of talking about AI, Jason.
Yeah, I know. Um, anyway, this show is obviously brought to you by my employers at QA Cafe, and the views expressed by myself and James do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership, and the same goes for Omdia, obviously, so that we can talk about whatever we want without consequences. um, and as such, it is also brought to you by our three great products at QA Cafe. The first being CD Router, the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi devices, and other customer premises equipment. When over 11,000, I've been saying 10,000, but very recently crossed 11,000. 11,000 pre-built test cases designed by industry experts who are deep into the protocols and standards that are out there, that works seamlessly with your CI/CD system so that you can build and deploy better products overall. Second being CloudShark Enterprise, which is our enterprise grade solution for packet capture analysis. With an unlimited license that you can deploy anywhere across your entire organization, it allows you to take control of something that might actually be a little bit up to shadow IT at this point, and making sure that you can get the most out of this very necessary thing that people still don't want to do but have to do. But now with the deep search API included, which lets you turn packet captures into an information point in your SIEM and SOAR systems. And lastly, Packet Viewer, which is the power behind CloudShark, which lets you drop a Wireshark ready experience into your uh, cloud managed or cybersecurity or networking platforms. You can find more about these at www.qacafe.com. All right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I wanted to get you on the show because, I've been I've been doing this since I was a grad student 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And so, it's like being exposed to the major sources of media like light reading and stuff like that has been obviously, that's the main way that all of us consume information about the telco and networking world. So I've followed you for a while. Um, you know, sort of watch the evolution of different technologies over time and your takes on them. So I was really excited to get you on the show.
Great. Well, pleasure to be here, Jason. And I actually do know what Wireshark is, although I haven't used it in some time. So I'm sort of halfway there to understanding what CloudShark is. But
Mhm.
sounds great.
Yeah. Well, what's really neat about actually looking at packets is it's like it really it like makes the light bulb go off on how all of this stuff actually works in real life, and it also makes it super accessible because one of the things and I'm interested to hear your story when it comes to this. One of the things I always try to do on the show is learn how people got into networking, which isn't always on purpose, right? Like, even if you're a computer science or electrical engineering person, getting into this particular field is not always something that you meant to do, right?
Yeah, well, I can certainly start there. It wasn't by design. You're right. So my studies, my university studies, took me down the heavy electrical and mechanical engineering route. And I was fairly oblivious about the whole communications industry and what was happening. I'm a little bit older than yourself, Jason. So I was studying in the early 90s. And there were some initial mobile phone networks. And there was no broadband, no fixed broadband. There was no internet access. But there was Well, none that I was aware of anyway. But mobile was very niche. You know, it was for stockbrokers, and they had these big analog telephones. And do you know what? It never even came on my radar as anything
Yeah.
remotely interesting. You know, I like technology, but back then it would have been, you know, the buzz would have been things like multimedia and virtual reality. I don't know if you remember a very old '90s movie about the gosh, what was his name? Some guy who was yeah, wasn't the sharpest tool in the box, and he went around cutting people's lawns, and then he took some wonder drug or something like that, and became in,
Lawnmower Man. Yeah.
which was it? Which was it?
Lawnmower Man. Lawnmower
Lawnmower
Man.
Man. There we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, and then suddenly he sort of became one with the computers and could travel around the universe through the internet and all that sort of stuff. So,
Right. He's like, oh no, I'm now made of crude polygons.
so yeah, but no, but obviously there was no very limited, even PC availability, you know, for residential, you know, consumers. I didn't really start to take an interest until a few years later when I was working in Argentina. I was working for a German consulting firm, and they would send faxes, and then suddenly one day somebody discovered this thing called email and said, "Hey, you know, you can send a fax via email." So okay. But more interestingly was the ability to actually talk using voice over IP, because you can imagine this would have been mid '90s now. The costs of international telephony were
Yeah.
ridiculous. I mean, you know, I remember
Completely
once
nuts. Yeah.
going on a business trip and having to make a phone call from somewhere in Mexico back to the UK to Britain. And it was just extortionate. It was just made no sense. It seemed to have no bearing with the actual cost of delivering those voice minutes. But it was just an opportunity to fleece business users who would be prepared to pay.
Right. Who had to
Um,
do it. Right. Yeah.
yeah. So this voice over IP thing was amazing. You know, you could. I mean, it worked very badly. You know, you could barely hear each other, but it was free.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of excitement about that. And then you know, we discovered web browsers and web crawlers. And wow, you could just spend hours trawling a very primitive form of the web, finding out information. You know,
Hmm.
and it was all very basic. There's no Google. The websites were fairly rudimentary, but it was still completely eye opening. And then I moved back to the UK, and to be honest, you know, telephony communications wasn't really a hot topic. It wasn't an area I wanted to get into in the late '90s. I sort of, because I was working in London, I ended up falling into the investment management industry because there's a lot of money managed in London. But again, I wasn't particularly interested in tech. And then I just sort of ended up through various job changes working for a stockbroker in the late '90s. And then that was the internet bubble. And so that was the hot sector. And everybody
Yeah.
wanted to know about Cisco, and everybody wanted to know about AT&T and Vodafone. And so tech and telecoms was sexy, and that was my downfall. I started to follow the sexy telecom and tech industry late '90s, and then the internet bubble burst, and things just went downhill for several years. But I became stuck. I became stuck following telecom technology, and I can't complain too much about it. It's given me a living, and it's continued to evolve and be interesting. But obviously, it's not where the hype is today, and it's not where the hype has been for the last 20 years. To be honest, there are occasional blips.
No,
You know.
it hasn't. And I have this running theory that I'll get to a little bit later because I want your take on it about because so you witnessed these sort of rises and falls, and like I've been thinking about it a lot with AI, but then even 10 to 15 years ago with IoT, and then before that, right, with the internet itself. And like I'm starting to notice certain patterns, right, about the way that technology ends up getting proselytized and then talked about by the media, is like the media and the tech bros, right? Like the startup people who are trying to make a buck real quick, right? Gamblers. And right? And it ends up being the same pattern that's happened probably maybe forever, but definitely with the advent of the internet, and you're seeing it again with AI. And we can talk about it eventually, but I don't want to get to it just yet because it's big. So you started writing about this and being deeply involved with it with light reading for basically since then, right? Yeah. And for
Yeah,
those of you
yeah.
who don't know what light reading is, it is, it's a division of OMDIA, but light reading is basically like everyone's primary source of telco technology news. Like it's just, that is how we experience what's going on.
Yeah, it's a pretty good news website about the telecom technology industry. Just to set the record straight, so both Omdia and Light Reading are part of a bigger company called Informa
Informa.
or
Yeah.
Informa Tech Target.
Yeah.
And Light Reading, was a startup. It was just a few guys who took their redundancy money from some magazine and
All
started
right.
a blog in the early 2000s. And just as they were launching that, they were launching it basically into the internet crash. So they had a very brief moment, I think, when things were going really well, and then it became difficult very quickly. But
Hmm.
they always had excellent editorial, and they always separated the commercial side of things from editorial, so you could trust what they were writing, and so that
Right.
brought
Right.
the audience.
Yeah.
And to this
It
day,
really
I
did.
think,
And that was it was very hard to sift through things that are not that, right? Like there's a lot of things that look like they're not paid promotions, but they're basically articles written by.
there are, and perhaps to sort of preempt a little bit of the AI discussion, of course, that's what's feeding these LLMs. So when you're asking
Hmm.
them questions, they're just taking in the stuff that's out there on the web for free,
Right.
which is, there's a heavy
Oh
vendor
yeah.
marketing spin there.
Right. Oh, that's a really good point, right? Because that's the stuff that is the most readily accessible.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the dilemma that we're in as a business, as an industry analyst firm that's publishing content behind a paywall. That clients are saying, well, I can get some pretty good answers from ChatGPT and other sources. They seem to know what they're talking about. Their answers are very confident. And the other thing is that if they are going to do a bit more research after their initial ChatGPT consultation, Omdia might not be in the sources that ChatGPT has
Right.
cited
Right.
because we're
Right.
behind a
Right. Right.
paywall. So
Oh,
it
especially
will
right,
go.
and especially not even the articles, but like the actual like big research pieces, right? So like the Broadband Forum has done a couple of commissioned work from Omdia in the past, and I mean these are very detailed reports, and you have to pay for them.
Yeah, but if it's sponsored in that way, then usually the sponsor makes it publicly available.
Right, right,
I
right.
mean,
We
they
do,
might
but
put it
still,
behind
you
the
still have your paid
registration
research,
page,
right?
but
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Hmm.
usually ends up fairly public. But a
Yeah,
lot of our content isn't, and that's the challenge. We can't give it away for free because then how would we make money? But then not giving it away for free means that we lack visibility in this new
right,
way that people are accessing information.
right. And people don't necessarily. I don't think people understand like how hard it is, like how much work that takes, especially if it's like really hardcore like interviews and research and data gathering and all that. Like it's a lot.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I wouldn't say it's getting any easier. I think if anything, the expectations just keep rising, so you have to do a better job, and ultimately, it's very similar to what a journalist does. You're trying to uncover the truth. You're trying to get past the vendor spin, and really try and work out which solutions are good, which solutions are mediocre, and then be able to back up those views with not necessarily with data, but with some clear arguments. Because obviously, nobody wants their solution to be described as mediocre, but not everybody can be the best. So it's yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough. You have to be rigorous, but
Right.
as long as you do it ethically and thoroughly, then usually people are professional about these things.
And so what are you doing right now? It's almost not necessarily consulting, but just sort of like helping helping telcos sort of understand the kinds of software they're trying to deploy and how it all fits together, kind of a thing.
Yeah, so right, what am I doing right now today? I've been going through some responses from vendors about a particular technology topic. It's called service management and orchestration. It's for radio access networks. It's an evolution
Oh,
of an
okay.
existing three-letter acronym, SON, or self-organizing networks.
Hmm.
And so, we try to put together a thorough questionnaire. We got responses back. Some of the answers are good and they're detailed, other answers are a bit vague. So this is the first pass. Then we'll go back to all of the participants and say, look, your score is low because you're not really giving us any detail here. So hopefully through this process, we'll learn a bit more
Right.
and ultimately come out with a fair assessment and evaluation. And then for telecom operator customers, for them, that's a starting point. I mean, by no means does that mean they just pick the top one. That's a starting point for their own evaluation because what they're able to do, which I can't, unfortunately, is they're able to deploy these solutions as proof of concepts in labs, in trials, in simulation environments, and get a
Right.
much better sense for
Right.
who can actually walk the walk rather than just talk the talk. That's very
Hmm.
difficult for me to get there, but I can sort of get part of the way in terms of evaluating who's able to give credible answers to detailed questions, and that's a proxy. It's not the same as analyzing the software itself, but hopefully it's useful. So that's
Right.
one of the things we do, and then very often what telecom operators want to talk to us about is what are their peers doing? What are what
Really?
successes are they having? What challenges are they facing? Because there's always a degree of paranoia. You listen, you read the media, you go to conferences, and you see these CTOs saying how they're implementing AI or whatever it is, and everything appears amazing. But behind the scenes, what they'll admit frankly, yeah, there's a bit of marketing spin to this. We're trying to position ourselves as a leader here, partly because they want to recruit young engineers and make their industry and their company look attractive.
Oh, interesting. Okay, okay. So it's
And
almost, wow, man, I can't
yeah,
believe it affects that too.
but Jason, everybody is selling all of the time.
Ugh.
And so you need to take that into account. So yeah, so the telcos are always paranoid. They're thinking, "Craig, all my peers, my competitors, they seem to be doing much better than me. What am I missing here?" And the reality is that they're not missing things. There are obviously
Is that
some.
like organizational imposter syndrome? Like,
There's some degree of that, yeah. And then there's always the issue about budgets. Every
mhm,
technology department, network strategy department would like to have more budget to research topics or deploy new technologies, but how can they justify that there's a real benefit from that?
right.
And they need to look to the industry and say, well, look, operator X did this in Thailand and it led to an increase in their net promoter score or a reduction in their churn or
Cool.
whatever it is. So they're looking for evidence so that they can make a case internally to get more budget to invest in technology.
Neat. Neat. Well, that's cool to be able to. It's like you said. Like, I mean, we even you wouldn't have to do that here, and not having that data is extraordinarily like it's very hard for a small company, let alone any team, to just sort of do all that on their own. It's
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's not like it's data that's sitting somewhere in a repository that you can just pull out and load up a financial calculation. It's anecdotal. It's,
yeah,
rough
right.
indications of where people are having success, where they aren't. Should you be throwing all your money into sovereign AI, or is that perhaps, just a money pit? There's no right answer to these questions, but
Yeah.
we try to help companies shape their strategy and share best practice, to the extent that
right,
we know about it.
right. And so obviously, like on the QA cafe side of things, like we deal very much with the home network mostly, and sort of like residential broadband devices and stuff like that. But just industry wide, and this sort of plays into what was happening for me last week. And I say last week, but by the time people are watching this, this was actually like kind of a month ago. Last week at the Broadband Forum, they did a what they call a base event. It's basically like a bunch of technology talks and stuff like that. And naturally, can you guess what every single topic was about?
Using AI in some way.
In some way, right? At least from the fully automated way. And we talk a lot about the TM forums categories of automation, right? And like what is it, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, between completely manual and completely automated to the point where you don't even see what decisions the robots are making, right? Um, and we talked a lot about that. And what was weird to me, there's a couple things that were weird to me. One is, of course, what we were talking about before, where the pattern of technology and the way that investors and tech bros and media talk about it is uh, this is the worst thing ever and is going to end society, or it is the greatest thing and it is going to make everyone a ton of money and transform society. But then in the reality, it's kind of like, eh, it's okay at some things. It's not that good at other things. Let's find out what it's okay at and try to make the most of that. And that's a lot of what people were talking about last week is like, sure, we can do all this. To what degree should we? Here's what we're doing so far. But people are actually pretty excited about it. And the thing that struck me is that, like you're saying about getting those raw numbers, about getting budget and justifying the expense, is like all of the automation talk was about saving costs, which was strange to me because when Broadband Forum did the last survey with OMDIA's help, it was it was more about the connected home, but it was also about the concept of value-added services, right? And telco is trying to find a way to be more than dumb pipes because dumb pipe is a race to the bottom, right? Everyone's going to increase bandwidth. Deploying fiber and whatever is going to become a necessity, and the price is going to go down. That's fine, but it's not going to make anybody more money. And so we've been sort of proselytizing this whole, well, maybe you should do more, but none of the conversation around automation was about that. It was like none of it was what can we do that changes the customer experience such that we could charge more money, which was very strange to me.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we've got a big telco consumer team. They do lots of surveys, research into all those sort of topics you mentioned, like value-added services, security services, home security, gaming, and there's lots of innovation still going on. It's a struggle, though. I think
Hmm.
um, the consumer is savvy, and they might be enticed in with bundling occasionally. They might, if you offer them a discounted access to a video streaming service, they might take that. But the the reason I don't is I'm always concerned that when I'm not looking, in 12 months' time or whatever, they'll suddenly increase the charge for that subscription service, and it won't be competitive than compared to if I just buy
Right,
directly from my video streaming uh, preferred provider.
right.
So I don't tend to go with those bundles personally, but I know they are successful. Um, Home security was a big thing some years ago. I remember AT&T made a number of acquisitions, but then I think they disposed of
Yeah.
those businesses. They didn't find
Hmm.
that it was really as synergistic as they'd hoped, but other operators still try. And then gaming is a popular one. And there are specific gaming packages you can get, but again, the results have been mixed in terms of overall success. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to try and break away from being a commodity. And I think there are parallels with perhaps with the electricity industry, that consumers just buy their electricity and they're not looking to buy other services necessarily from their energy provider. Um,
Right.
maybe that changes a little bit with smart metering, and you can be, you might want to buy solar panels from your energy provider and an installation of those because it somehow relates to your consumption of electricity or your electric vehicle charging. So, the electricity companies are trying to innovate too, but they're perhaps even more commodities than telcos.
Right. Right. And that's what I mean. Does that mean so with the stuff that the research that you guys are doing right now and trying to, evaluate all these products is because what struck me about the conversations is that it was all about OpEx savings. Right. It was all about OpEx savings,
Mm.
which it seems to me like you can only take that so far, but that's what it was about. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the hard reality of the CFOs. Perhaps are more jaded than some of the CMOs about the revenue
Ain't that the
opportunity.
truth?
They've heard it a few times before. It hasn't transpired, so they can only really see a business case if there's some sort of cost out. Obviously, they would like nothing more than to be able to grow the top line because they know that their investors are keen on growth. But it's a lot harder to grow the top line.
Yeah.
We are seeing price increases coming through. We're in a slightly more inflationary world than we were, let's say, 10 years ago. And
Hmm.
so you can kind of lose price increases in the noise of gasoline price increases and energy price increases. A few extra percent on your telco bill can sort of pass under the radar. So it should
Right.
be an environment in which telecom operators can increase pricing, provided that the competitive dynamics remain stable.
Right.
Um, and on the whole, I mean, I'm based in Europe. We have a tradition here of having like four mobile operators typically, and many often broadband suppliers in the same market, and that can lead to quite intense pricing pressure. But there's still a movement to try and move that back towards more of a balance. So in France, for example, just recently, the fourth mobile operator has sort of given up. They've decided they can't really make a profitable business longer term, and so they've made a proposal to be acquired by the other three mobile operators. It still needs to get regulatory approval, and often when these things do get approved by regulators, there are lots of concessions. They might
Right.
ask for a new MVNO to be launched in order to still try and keep that competitive intensity up. But in the US, you're very lucky in some respects. Well, from a telco perspective, lucky. Maybe not so much from a consumer perspective. In the mobile market, a relatively small number of players, more competition in the fixed broadband market. But typically, in any individual city, it's typically the telco and the major cable provider. There's
Right.
not so much overbuilding and other options when it comes to
Right.
fixed broadband. It is my
Well,
understanding.
with the exception of, and this is again, greatest thing since sliced bread versus worst thing ever, somewhere in the middle. Uh, fixed wireless,
Mm.
and it was a very, very interesting series of events over the last couple of years with that, right? Because um, and I was amazed by how much money Verizon and T-Mobile were putting into this, right? They both bought
Mm.
Super Bowl ads to push their fixed wireless, right? Insane amounts of money, right? But whatever they did worked, at least for T-Mobile, and all of a sudden you had some of the cable operators really freaking out, like just hemorrhaging subscribers to the
Mm.
point where they started making like these really specific like attack ads, almost hilariously specific, right? Like I think what was it? There was one company who you can probably guess had an entire website dedicated to why you should not get T-Mobile service.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know it has been a success. Fixed wireless access. I was surprised. I thought initially it was just a way of using up surplus spectrum that the mobile operators had until such time as 5G took off, and then they would need that spectrum back for true mobile services. But it's been a success. I would have thought the strategy is, once you've determined that you've got a certain number of fixed wireless access customers in a particular town, let's say, or urbanization, then you can make the business case. Okay, I'm going to build out fiber to those customers because
right, right,
longer
right, right.
term,
It's kind of like a
fiber
little
is going to
stopgap.
be,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, a way of figuring out the market and having and making use of spare spectrum. I
right.
mean, the other play now is satellite for those rural locations. That satellite services are, reasonably priced, and the throughput is decent. So
Yeah,
that's another alternative consumers have.
right, right, right. And ultimately, the end user doesn't care. The end user does not care how they just want to be connected all the time and have it working all the time. Right.
Yeah, and arguably satellite is more robust because with
Mm,
fixed networks, sometimes there are backhoe incidents and you lose connectivity. So satellite connection, there's a lot of redundancy built in up there, and they keep on adding more satellites. So it's obviously, weather can be a factor. You can lose the signal strength in heavy rain. So it's not perfect, but I think an interesting backup for
yeah,
not just for consumers, but for enterprises for their connectivity.
right. But so on the other side though, with the stuff that you're dealing with right now, I keep talking about how, the automation was all about saving OpEx, but is there a degree to which anyone is feeling like this level of automation, the ability to improve the customer experience almost instantaneously, making sure that it works properly, is that giving them some leeway in being able to charge more and change the language? Because we've seen the language change a little bit, where it's like not people being like, oh, you're going to get 300 megabits per second with me for this price versus only 100 with them for that price, versus in switching it over to being the most reliable, right?
Mm,
Or the
mm.
most, or the best Wi-Fi, or the best whatever, right? Not talking about speed at all, just trying to market to the this is going to work all the time.
I don't know, Jason, because I think that's just sort of table stakes. People expect it to be reliable,
Yeah,
and they get very angry if it's not.
right.
So, I mean, it's a bit like a politician campaigning on being, I'm less dishonest than the others. That's not necessarily a great campaign strategy. So telcos, it's an expectation that it works, that it's reliable. I'm not sure they can necessarily point to it being a differentiator. Um, but we all know the ones that get the most complaints. So in most markets, the regulators are keeping track of complaints, and they often publish, reports about who's getting the more complaints, and that's not a good place to be.
Right.
Yeah, there's definitely an incentive to improve quality of experience.
Yeah. And it's funny because, in my entire journey of being from being young to now is I never expected myself to be sort of a telco like advocate, but now understanding what that is that they have to deal with from all sides, right? It's like nobody likes you and but everybody expects you to do the best job.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, and there are other industries that are in the same position. I mean, do you like your bank? But no, but heck,
Right.
you expect them to take receipt of your money, look after it, make it available to you whenever you want it. It's a hugely important, critical service.
Right.
But you're not. If you're anything like me, you stick with your bank through apathy rather than loyalty.
That's true. But that's not like we know that's not sustainable, right? Like people have seen like people do churn from their internet service like all the time.
Yeah, yeah, they do,
Yeah.
and some of the neo banks are even getting into telecom services, launching their own MVNO, things like that. Trying
Really
to, yeah, yeah. So
interesting.
I don't know if you have Revolut in the States, but Revolut is one of these neo banks, all digital, no store footprint,
Oh
and
yeah, like what was ING was like one of the first ones.
is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So yeah, so they've launched an MVNO recently. Um,
interesting.
we'll have to see how it goes.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, are they just trying to what are they trying to do there?
Well, all of your transactions through the bank are on the smartphone anyway, so they think it's
Right,
just a natural extension. If you're um, a loyal, if you're banking with them, they can provide the mobile phone service. They might want to sell you the mobile phones themselves, and they'll look to add on other services, insurance,
right.
so it's just expanding
Uh,
outside of their
okay.
core product
It was
offering.
so it's kind of like when Domino's was fixing potholes in the road.
Domino's was doing that.
Yeah, they're like, we need to get our pizzas to people, and
Oh, I
these
see.
guys aren't fixing their.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. No, 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 but that's a really great topic though, because you know you have obviously had the entire experience and pain and history of net neutrality versus telcos being like, oh, well, these guys aren't paying their fair share, and these guys are like, shut up, you're just a network, and and all that. So it's like, it's tough. It's really tough, because
Mm,
if Netflix is not working, nobody blames Netflix.
no, it's the network. Absolutely.
Yeah,
But then, to be
every
fair,
time.
Netflix is pretty reliable. It doesn't hasn't gone down for a while, as far as I'm aware. But neither
That's
is my
true.
network. My home broadband, I have to say, is a pretty good service. The
Knock on
only
wood.
the only time I ever had issues with it was when during the pandemic, I got a backup. I got the cable service, cable broadband, um, in addition to the. I think were we on DSL in those days? Might have, no, we might have been on fiber to the cabinet or something. So the last 200 yards was copper, but it was still a pretty good service. And so I had both for redundancy because it was when I just first moved to working full home, and my wife did. So I wanted to have a backup in case one stopped working. And then at one point, I set up the network at home so that my son, for his schoolwork, was on the cable broadband, but I and my wife were on um, the fiber to the cabinet, thinking that we needed the better service. But unfortunately, he couldn't upload his schoolwork
Yeah,
because the network is so asymmetric. It's very
right.
geared to download of videos, but
Hmm.
very poor upload. So we ended up cancelling it, and
Right,
since then we just get by on the one service, and if it stops working, I don't know, go into the
right,
office or tether to a mobile phone or something like that would be the backup.
right, right. And I'm always like empathetic to how much of a shock to the system COVID was, when everybody had tailored their networks around having asymmetric service, and all of a sudden it was like, nope, everybody needs to broadcast video
Yeah,
from their house. Like,
exactly. Like this video call now. A lot
yeah,
of that was going on, and for whatever reason, yeah, kids were having a hard time uploading their homework, or at least that was a good excuse to have.
like the network ate it.
Yeah, the dog ate my homework and stopped me
Yeah.
from uploading it.
I was found it very interesting, like the schools trying to retain some semblance of power over things that were happening, and it was like, no, sorry, this kid's gonna be in his pajamas. There's nothing you can do about it. Like,
Yeah, well, they had a hard time getting kids to switch on their cameras as well.
yeah, right, right,
Um, so easy to to be at home in your
Hmm.
pajamas, or indeed lying in your bed on your smartphone.
That's how I want to take classes. Oh, that's fine. No, but it's very cool, and I love our industry because we are simultaneously like the users of it as we are deeply involved in it. So it's kind of a cool it's kind of cool perspective. Like I'm sure there's other industries that are like that, but it's maybe not quite as immediate and palpable, right?
Indeed, indeed. So you touched on the hype bubble earlier. So what's your take, Jason, on the AI bubble? You know, we've got OpenAI just filing its prospectus for IPO.
Yeah.
SpaceX, admittedly, most of that story is about space rather than AI, but they
Hmm.
have an AI play as well. And then at some stage, presumably Anthropic is going to file for IPO. That's a lot of money going to be sucked up by these companies.
Yeah. And it's like I said, I feel like either people don't learn or don't remember, but like other technologies have followed this exact same pattern, right? And it's the one I was describing before. And it's hard because I talk about politicians this way too, where it's like there's a difference between somebody who knows they're a grifter and is trying to grift you, and somebody who is a true believer and doesn't realize they're grifting people, right?
Hmm, not
And there
true.
are some of both in the AI world, right? There are both in the AI world. And then you have sort of the maybe now more than ever before, even though this is exactly how the internet bubble happened too, ironically, because the internet stuck around and was actually transformative, but um you have the I want to say gamblers, but it's sort of like it is the same ilk of people who bet on sports that are deeply involved in the way that certain new technologies are going to take off because they're trying to beat the market, right? They're trying to beat the market. So we're going to like jump on this thing. And they don't care if it crashes later,
Hmm,
right? Because they're going to get their money and get out. That's what's happening with AI right now. And we've seen it a bunch of times before, except
yeah.
for the true believers. And the true believers are there and they really think that this is going to happen. And it's always weird because whenever you see one of the CEOs sort of writing about uh, that AI is becoming conscious or something like that, I'm reading, I'm like, do you actually think this? Like, what is your angle right now? Because it's not, right? LLMs are not. They are very good pattern recognition engines, but they are doing a very specific job about with token resolution and trying to find the next thing. Like it's just it is part of the entire structure. There is no other AI science right now. I mean, there is, but right now it's all been theoretical, and it's been theoretical for a long time, right? Like the
Yeah,
mathematicians have been working on trying to replicate consciousness for a very long time. This is not it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't get happy, it doesn't get sad, it just runs programs, right?
Yeah, I mean,
To
true.
quote Short Circuit.
It's
And
certainly,
so you have this thing, right? And then the media and the zeitgeist of it all sort of exacerbates the opposite side of that, where it's like, oh, also it's the worst thing ever. It's destroying the environment. Robots are going to take over the world. We have no idea what we're doing. Fight it at all possible. It's stealing from artists. Blah 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 blah. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and it's kind of meh. Like it's kind of like this is really good at it's good at generating drafts of things. It's good at it's good at grunt work, right? It's not good at making stuff up. It's not good at actually being smart about things, right? Like
mm, mm.
one of the things that I think is the most important is that it's not stealing anybody's jobs because you have to be better at your job to use it. Like you have to be an expert
Yeah,
to use
yeah,
AI.
yeah.
Because if you aren't, it's just going to be terrible and wrong, right?
Well, I'd agree with a lot of that. I just wanted to reference a book I read recently called Reshuffle by a business academic, a microeconomist called Sangeet Chowdhury. And he brought a sort of systems thinking lens to looking at AI and how it's going to impact um, industries, individual companies, roles within companies. And his key takeaway was it's not just about automating the things that you do today and doing them faster. That's not where the biggest benefit will come. The biggest benefit will come from those who can take these new tools and use them to reorganize work. So reorganize the activity of you as an individual, reorganize the work of an entire department within a
Hmm.
company, reorganize how a whole company is organized itself. So perhaps instead of those traditional departments, there's a cleverer way to do it, and then even reorganizing whole industries so that your role in the past might have been, making widgets, but in the future your role will be advising companies on how to use the widgets in the best way. You become
Right.
a service provider instead of a product provider.
Which is honestly the natural progression of most people's careers anyway, before all of this, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So he doesn't have all the answers, but he has a different way of looking at it. And I'm not sure that helps us decide whether we should take part in the SpaceX IPO or not. But
No,
getting back to that point, you said I think a bit of what you were describing was the greater fool theory that you buy stocks on the basis that, well, I'll be able to sell them to somebody else at a higher price. I have no idea what
which is
it's
which is
worth.
gambling. Let's be like that's gambling. like like getting dividends on return from your investment because you're effectively lending money to another company to use your capital more effectively.
Mm.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
But expecting to sell the stock later for a higher price is gambling.
Yeah, there's nobody's investing in these things on the basis of dividends.
Right.
It's all about growth, and it's very hard to tell at this stage. When I remember when Google IPO'd, which would have been sort of mid 2000s, um, they were valued initially at something like $20 billion, if I remember right. And I thought, well, that's a crazy amount. That's like the entire size of the digital advertising market globally, $20 billion of revenue. How can Google be worth that much? Well, they're worth a lot more today. But so has the digital advertising market expanded. Um, I don't have the figures about the total advertising market. Certainly, a lot of the growth in digital has come at the expense of analog. It's come at the expense of magazines, newspapers, TV, radio, etc. But also, I think advertising budgets have expanded, and what we've seen is recently some of the digital advertising companies like Meta, they're using AI to make their adverts more targeted, more specific, and they're working better. And people are spending more. They're spending
Yeah.
more on advertising because they're seeing a benefit.
Right,
It's
right.
quite easy for them
No,
to.
exactly. And that's great because that is something that it's good at. But when you have companies that are just like making up titles about people who are bent on their AI strategy or being like, you guys need to do something with AI, and people are like, what?
Mm, mm. Oh well, that's like
Or
in any large organization. The board is saying we need an AI strategy. The CEO is saying
mhm.
we need to launch an AI product, and then further down the chain, people are like, "Well, we've been using AI for the past 20 years. What's new?"
Right.
Well, use more of it. No, there are new tools. There is this concept of agentic AI, and it is potentially hugely transformational. And it's still very early days. We're still figuring out how can you use it in a safe way. How can you avoid any unnecessary business risks, and deal with the inevitable mistakes. But humans make mistakes all the time, and we
Right, right,
we
right.
manage to
Which is
cope
a
with that.
huge point, right?
So I think we just need to work out ways of not believing that some of these generative AI based systems are infallible, recognizing that they will make mistakes, and then having the necessary checks and balances. So maybe a lot of the human work in the future is checking the work of AI, checking the sources, checking
Right.
the evidence that's provided there, sense checking
Which
it.
is effectively what we're doing right now. And honestly, it's the same as thing as you would do as like a copy editor, right? And that just from a computer science perspective, like the thing that makes me sort of laugh inside is that the way that our professors were all trying to teach us computer science was about understanding the fundamental mathematical concepts, algorithm analysis, optimization, all these things. And but the job market was demanding that we all learn how to code and learn a
Mm.
particular particular languages of the day or whatever. And it turns out that our professors were right all along because if if in the future AI is doing the grunt work, you need to be an expert in algorithm analysis to make sure that it worked and is good and is going to be efficient, right?
And having an idea about architecture
Yeah,
and how to create a system that can be updated, in a modular way, not just some big blodge of code. No, it's interesting that writing code obviously is one of the main use cases for generative AI. And I think initially people thought, well, wow, this is amazing. This is going to put Salesforce and Workday out of business. I can just press a button and generate an app. And obviously, people who understand this stuff in detail understand that building applications is not just about writing lots of code fast.
no,
It can certainly speed up that part of the process, but creating a great application involves multiple disciplines, a lot of insight, and not just about writing lines of code. So that's why I think it's premature, perhaps, this sort of SaaS apocalypse
mhm.
theory that's been going around. I'm not sure that's going to come
No,
to
no,
play.
it's not. And actually, there was an interview with the Take Two Studios CEO, so the company that makes Grand Theft Auto and a bunch of
Mm,
other top tier games. And what he said was really, really cool. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, where it's like that people are like, oh, well, people are just going to be able to pump out games, blah, blah, blah. He's like, that's already been the case for many years. Do you know how many iPhone app games there are right now that are terrible? Like there are people already pump out terrible games all the time without AI. It's like in order to make an actual good thing, you have to be good at it and know all this other stuff. It's a huge other process that's not gonna, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's good. And of course, the great hope, getting back to telecoms for a second, a lot of telecom operators are hopeful that somehow adding AI into more applications will lead to more traffic in the network, and somehow they'll be able to monetize that. So these traffic flows might require like a silver glove service kind of thing. They
Yeah.
might have
Yeah.
latency requirements, or there might be suddenly huge elephant flows of traffic that need to be prioritized.
Right.
And it's going to be an enterprise play more than a consumer play.
Right. Right. And I
So
think that's a good thing.
there
I
is
think that's a good
discussion
thing.
about that. I'm not sure if they'll really be able to monetize it, but
Mhm.
they're interested in it.
Right, right, right.
And
It's
equally
funny
with
because it's kind of the reverse when people are like, "Oh, 50% of the internet is now, you know, scrapers and AI bots." It's like, well, it was already like that for a pretty long time. It just wasn't like this, right? Because
yeah,
the Google the search engines and all that, everybody was had constantly running things, and that sort of data wouldn't need to be prioritized. But definitely does, especially if it's something mission critical and latency sensitive, like you say.
yeah. Well, rewinding a little bit in time, so there was a time when the majority of internet traffic was peer-to-peer file sharing, and telcos didn't monetize that. And then that over time that became video streaming, and
Hmm.
they tried to monetize that by offering their own IPTV services, reselling other video streaming services, and where they could by trying to demand that the video service providers would pay them to access their customers. So I think in Korea, for example, that's a case where they pursued the Netflix and tried to sue them. I think ultimately they've decided that stopping your broadband subscribers from accessing these services is not a good thing because
Right.
those consumers will just switch to another broadband provider who's not buying
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
But so they struggle there. So and the precedents for monetizing these new waves of traffic are not great. So the other angle, the other way telcos are trying to take advantage of this is by offering their own AI services, and outside of the US, this is often done under the umbrella of sovereignty, so sovereign cloud, sovereign
Right,
AI.
right, 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 right.
Operators in Europe and enterprises in Europe, some of them anyway, are keen to have a solution that is available to them just in case one day
Right,
some of the US companies flick the kill switch and they can no longer access.
right, right,
I mean, it's not a scenario that anybody would have even imagined, say, 3 4 years ago. But occasionally headlines
yeah,
happen, people get worried, they want a backup plan.
right. It's like, as usual, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I think that's basically the conclusion of, of any conversation about technology and finance, right?
Yes, yes, this is true. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, James. I really, really appreciate it. Like I said, it's like I've read your stuff for years, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just ask him if he wants to come on the show.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure, Jason. Enjoyed the conversation,
Yeah, me
and
too. Yeah,
let's keep in touch, keep the conversation going.
that sounds really good. And keep the comedy. I feel like that's what keeps us sane.
Yeah, I'm probably funnier in print than I am in on video,
No,
but
but that's important.
we all have our
Uh,
flaws.
so if you have questions for James, do throw them in the comments. Subscribe to this on YouTube because it helps me out to see how much people like the show, or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and a couple of the other platforms that we automatically push to, whatever your favorite is. And above all, own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Jason.